Welcome to the Planning and Economic Development Subcommittee. Today is February 5th, 2019. Welcome everybody. I am going to call this meeting to order. The first item is call to the public, which we don't have any cards at this moment. Item number 1 is minutes of the previous meeting on January 8th, 2019. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Items 2 through 7 are on consent. I will be pulling item 3 out for a continuance. So we will be voting on items 2 and 4 through 7. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. We are now on, number 3. I'm sorry.
Continue.
We have to motion to continue. I'm sorry.
I move item 3 to be continued to the next agenda?
Yes, continue to 3/5.
3/5/19.
Madam
Okay.
Chair, members of the subcommittee, staff is recommending the item be continued to the April subcommittee. They have some additional information they need to work on, so it won't be ready for March.
So what is the date for the
April
se-
2nd.
April 2nd. I move to April 2nd then for item 3.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving to items 8 and 9, they're for info only. Does anybody need anything out of 8 and 9? It's the Housing CIP update and the Graffiti Free Awareness Month. No? Okay. I don't need to make a motion for that, do I? Yeah, okay. And I'm looking for item, I believe it's 10. Item 10. Okay, yeah, I was like, which one is it? Item 10, Downtown Code Map Text Amendment. Councilman Nowakowski.
And can we have
I don't have
Alan
cards.
just,
I have
Alan, can you
cards, so-
explain the posting issue?
Certainly. Madam Chair, Councilman Nowakowski, members of the subcommittee. Item 10 has come before you several times before. This is a text amendment to the downtown code to amend the height provisions for a property located at the northwest corner of Central Avenue and Willetta Street. This item was continued at your last meeting. Anytime an item is continued, an applicant is required to update the signage, to note the correct continuance, to tell the public when the item will be heard. In this particular case, the applicant did not comply with those requirements and did not update the signage. So it's on your agenda today because you continued to the state specific, but the signage was not updated. So what the council needs to do today is to continue this matter so that the signage can be updated and then the matter can move forward at that point.
Go ahead.
So I have some questions. During, about 2 weeks ago, we actually met with the individual that owns the property or the representative of that property and individuals that live behind and on the side of the property. And one of their biggest concerns was that they didn't actually know what type of project, what was gonna be built there. And that was kind of the big hiccup in this whole conversation. We could talk about changing the height and all that, but at the same time, there's not a tenant in there, we really don't know what's going into that piece of property. So what I'd like to do is until they find some type of project or tenant or what's going to be built there, that they can actually have a conversation with the community and the neighbors, that we should continue this indefinitely. What that means is basically when there is a tenant or a project in place, that they bring it back and have that conversation. Can we do that, or?
So, Madam Chair, Councilman Nowakowski, yes. I believe what you're, what you're asking is that the applicant go work with a developer who's going to build the project, come up with a design instead of just a text amendment that just asks for the additional height. Go partner with someone so that they can bring forward a project to have some more in-depth discussion is what the community is really asking for relative to granting this height along Central Avenue. And so that is something that the council can do. What would have to happen is when it comes back, they would have to do all new advertising again. They'd have to do new letters to the community, new signage, go out, have more meetings to say, okay, we're going to bring this case back, and then we're going to go forward with it.
And I want to make it very clear that the Roosevelt Row individuals are very pro-development, but they just want to make sure what type of a project's going into that area. That's what I heard, my interpretation of it. And with that, I would like to make a motion to continue this indefinitely.
Can I ask 2 questions before
Absolutely.
we move forward? I guess my question would be, if we continue it indefinitely, why wouldn't they just pull the project? I mean, I don't know what the pros are in this whole thing. And by pulling it indefinitely or pulling the project, if you pull the project and you come back, knowing what the neighborhood wants, I'm assuming they would come back with someone that's willing to develop and show a project.
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, that is an option that the applicant could do. You know, in this case, I think the applicant was, because the discussion really focused on some more details that the developer, because they don't have a project yet ready to go, they don't have. And so the community's willingness to look at any additional height is really them saying, we don't have anything here to respond to. And so I think that's is really what Councilman Nowakowski is saying, is go out there and look for a project, someone that's going to develop something, and come in with this instead of just a text amendment. Because the way the downtown code treats height is it is a text amendment to the zoning ordinance. It's not a straight rezoning case like in every other case that you have before you. Most of the time, rezoning cases have an applicant, they have a development project that they're proposing.
I know.
It's conceptual, as you know, but they have something they're proposing. In this case, height is granted via text amendment, and so they don't have requirements for that kind of specific, information. But what the community is really saying is we're not prepared to even evaluate anything more than the 75 feet unless there's a real project that we can look at.
Right, and the reason why I was joking with you, Alan, because you know I'm in the middle of one right now, so that's why I was like, yeah, I know this whole process. Okay, that's what I just wanted to, I was just curious. Go ahead.
And just for the record is that we're going to have to continue this till next month if we don't do it this way. So that's the
Yeah.
easiest way
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
instead of continuing, and then having the community out there for another month, not sure what's going to happen. I believe this is the best way to have that, keep those conversations and have that individual find a tenant for this piece of property or project.
No, I agree with you. I just wanted to know why, if it was possible, actually, if we
Yeah.
could do it indefinitely. So it is. I need a second.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. For those that have cards, this is speaking about the indefinite continuance. I'm not sure if that's what you want to speak on. Okay, go ahead. It's Bill Shield on the indefinite continuance.
Yeah, thank you. Bill Shield, 301 West Linwood Street from the Roosevelt neighborhood. First, I want to thank Councilman Nowakowski for for first meeting with us, bringing the parties together, and then recognizing the concerns we had. I do think, Councilwoman Pastor, to your point, I think the neighborhood would much prefer withdrawal of the case at this point, and then come back when there is a real project, come back with a project that, again, we are going to be very open to looking at. I think all of the neighbors have that openness, but I'm concerned about an indefinite continuance where we're basically every 30 days have to wonder whether there's going to be something popping up on an agenda. So if it's possible, either for the subcommittee to suggest the withdrawal or the developer to handle the withdrawal, I think that would be better. I mean, when we had our meeting with Councilman Nowakowski a couple of weeks ago, at that time the developer said he didn't want any more continuances and wanted this thing voted on, and that's what we were prepared to do today. And so we're taken aback by their lack of follow-through to get the the proper posting and maintaining us in this limbo of every 30 days having to worry about whether it's the project is going to come up, I don't think is fair to the neighborhood. So respectfully, a withdrawal, I think, would be a better solution for everyone.
Okay, I think I have the applicant's representative, Heather Dukes from Lazarus, Sylvan, and Bang. I should have done something differently on this, but we'll figure it out. I have the rule makers here.
Good morning, Councilwoman Pastor and members of the committee. My name is Heather Dukes. I'm with Lazarus, Sylvan, and Bangs. We're located at 206 East Virginia Avenue. First and foremost, I want to apologize. Our representative of our client, Maydot Ventures LLC, Alvaro Sande, could not be here this morning. He is dedicated to continuing discussions with the neighborhood. We have another telephone conference with our client group tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And so we are actively looking at options for moving this text amendment forward. At this time, we do not want to withdraw the case. And Alvaro, by attending that meeting on January 22nd, did show his good faith efforts to continue the discussions with the neighborhood. One of the things that we will be discussing with the client tomorrow is this indefinite continuance. And again, we would just ask that for the neighborhood group, we would like to keep you guys informed. This will not be a last minute discussion of whether we're moving forward. We will give adequate notice if we plan to put the case back on an agenda. And so, again, thank you for your consideration. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Go ahead, Councilman Nowakowski.
So can you explain what the process is? So let's say tomorrow they decide to build something else there. They would have to go through the whole process again of posting and informing the community and sending out letters. Is that true, or?
So Councilman Olkowski, members of the subcommittee, let me be really clear. They have existing zoning rights today, that if they wanted to build up to the 75 feet in height, they could do that by right without any council action to make happen. They have to comply with the requirements, and they could do that.
And I believe
So-
the community is good with that.
Yeah, so that might be something they decide to do. To do anything more than that, it will take some council action to do that, and that would take the place of if they came in and, let's say this meeting tomorrow that Ms. Dukes referenced, they did have an agreement to go out and try and find someone. They found a co-developer on the project, started working on some plans of what it could look like and the height they would want to see and construct. Then they would have to come back and they would essentially have to re-advertise it, do all new letters again, update the signs. We tell them, go out, have more meetings with the neighbors now that you have designs to show, go out, have those discussions with the community, obviously to meet with your office as well, and others on the 11th floor, so that they can talk about their application, as it has evolved over time.
Just for clarification, so if they come in tomorrow, you can't put it on the next council meeting agenda, right? You have to follow that process you just explained.
Correct. They would have, the indefinite continuance does not preserve their advertising ability. And the reason that the council continues things to date specific is that preserves the legal advertising record, because then the public who's interested in that case can follow along and say, oh, I know it was continued from this date to this date. When you do an indefinite continuance, you break that, and so you have to start that advertising cycle over again.
I just want to make sure there's clarification that there's not a possibility for them to sneak something through there without the neighbors knowing about it, especially the individuals that live right next door and behind the project, right?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilman Nowakowski, that is correct.
Okay.
Councilman
He
Mendoza?
answered the question.
Oh, okay.
About the
I've-
notification.
I have a question. What is truly the difference between just pulling the case and leaving it indefinitely?
So if they withdrew the case, they would start over. The other option to be before the council would be to withdraw it and then refile a new case. In which case they would then start over, going back to the village, going to the planning commission, starting all that. This preserves them kind of in the spot that they're in and says, The council's giving them direction, the subcommittee in this case, saying, go out, get someone to be a co-developer, work on a real project, and then bring it forward, and then you could start back up. And at that point, the council may say, we want you to go back and visit with the village anyways. That's something
Right.
that they could certainly do. They could say, look, if the concern really is what the neighbors' immediate thought were, the neighbors have reached some agreement on it, then the case can move forward.
Okay. So then it would be really if it comes back, it would really be us giving directive of saying, well, it's been a while, so we could direct saying, please go back to the villages and start.
Yeah, that's certainly something that the council can always ask them to go back to the village and have more of a discussion. In this particular case, I think that the issue really is the immediate neighbors and the fact that they don't have a solid design. The neighbors, when we have met with them and talked with them, seem to be open to some height, but it was really, we don't have anything to evaluate this on, so it's not really a fair question to be having at this point.
Thank you.
And just to my colleagues, some of the concerns is like a parking lot and you're facing your house or so, and things like that. So the community is very open, but they just want to know what's going to be built, what's going to be facing their homes and living quarters. And so I think it's just really sitting down with a project that or a person that knows what's going to be built there and having that conversation with the community and seeing if they're okay with it. And if right now they're all right with the 75 feet, and they were even okay with the 100 feet, but beyond that, that's where the hiccups started happening.
So I commend Councilman Nowakowski in this whole process. As you will see in the future, there's another one very similar to this, and you gave me some new perspective on how to handle certain things. So appreciate your good work. Heather, if you have anything else to say, I believe that.
Just one clarification, and our client has really focused on working with the neighborhood, but the issue that we keep running into is with finding a developer and coming up with a site plan in this process. There's no ability to stipulate it to a site plan. And so I just want to remind everyone that with this text amendment process, this isn't a typical rezoning where you can stipulate to substantial conformance to a site plan. And so you always have that issue in this process. And we want to work with the neighborhood. Alvaro has expressed that, and we are going to address the neighborhood's request to have a specific project. But I just want to put that out there that this process doesn't allow for us or the neighborhood to have a specific assurance that that's exactly what will be built.
And if something like that does happen, I think we would just revert to the 75 feet where the community is happy with. So, and I think it would be denied, from this council member, and hopefully my colleagues would follow that lead. And just clarification, everyone, we can't pull it today. If we wanted to pull it, there wasn't the proper posting on the signs. So the only thing we can do actually today is continue it. And then we found another means of actually just continuing it indefinitely. So that's the reason why we use that method, for clarification for everybody out there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like some clarity, because this is a piece of a learning curve that I have at this moment, or aha moment. In this text amendment, what I had heard, or how I interpreted, is that in the text amendment, if we go ahead with it, we could not add any stipulations to it.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, that is correct.
Okay.
When
So
you're
that is
talking
the aha
about,
moment for me.
you're talking about the way the downtown code was adopted, because it focused on downtown and areas where we want height. The height is regulated as part of the text. There's a map that shows all the heights for buildings
Right.
downtown, which is different than the rest of the city at large, where it's a zoning case that you have to file that has a requirement for site plans and elevations, and that's what gets you the height. Within the downtown code, because it's an area where we are actively encouraging height, the standard is not as significant as outside of that area.
Okay. So, Ellen, I'm going to go to, because I think this is a key for those of us that are not in the development planning world and have all the knowledge. There is a case in my area that when they went for zoning, there were stipulations written on this property or rezoning. What ended up happening is that in between the whole process, it got sold to a different developer due to finances. The stipulations in there, because it was due to be senior living or senior housing, there were certain stipulations made within this property. Because it changed from senior living, senior housing, to residential, and it was zoned residential, the stipulations did not follow with that property or the new site plan.
Mm-hmm.
At that moment, that's when our constituents unraveled, because those stipulations then weren't met in the fairness and the agreement of the neighborhood at that time. And there is my understanding and the way I've worked this case, we can't go back and say, here are these stipulations, because it's a different site plan or piece. Am I on?
So I believe, Madam Chair, you're talking about the one at 3rd and Osborne,
Yes.
I think it was.
Yes.
In that particular case, it was not a rezoning case. They had R5 zoning entitlements. What they went forward with was a variance to reduce the parking for a senior assisted living center, because that was their original development proposal. As part of that variance, they agreed with the neighbors to not have some balconies that would face the neighborhood. But then when the project got sold and somebody came in and built a regular R5 project under the existing zoning, so they did not use the variance that granted them the parking reduction, and that was the city's legal ability for that stipulation was, if you want this variance to reduce your parking, you agreed to not provide the balconies. That's not the project they built, because they went under the existing zoning, and that's how come they didn't have to comply with that stipulation about the balconies.
Okay. So this property, it's at 75, those are the stipulations, right?
Correct. So that's what's
So
there today.
if the new text amendment, from what I had heard, if it was the new text amendment, then we would not be able to put stipulations.
Correct. We can't add stipulations to the text amendment.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I've learned a lot this morning. I have, thank you.
Thank you.
I have Andrew Mata. Andrew, do I see? This is on the continuance. You're fine with it? Okay. Joan Kelchner, you're fine with it? Okay. Thank you. We are now on item 11.
It's in my name.
Good morning. We are speaking on electric scooter ride share downtown pilot program.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I'm Mario Paniagua, Deputy City Manager, and with me this morning is Kenny Knutson, Street Transportation Director, and Assistant Director, Brianna Velez. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the proposed pilot shared electric scooter program with the subcommittee. In other cities across the nation and within the valley, we've seen the use of shared electric scooters for people desiring another option for short trips or to combine with other transportation modes like public transit. to get around to work, school, play, or while visiting. In response to interest that we've seen and we've received from our members of our community, from the downtown business partners, and directly from the companies that are providing these shared scooters, we're here to discuss proposed regulations and parameters for a pilot within downtown Phoenix. What we've seen in other cities where these scooters have been deployed is that rolling out the scooters to our community needs to be done in a way that's safe, in a way that does not create obstructions or hazards for pedestrians or drivers or other users, and in a way that does not create visual blight. So Keeney and Brianna will take you through the presentation outlining the proposed pilot program, and our intent is to be responsive to the community interest and be able to provide this amenity for these in Phoenix, but to do so in a way that increases safety and avoids problems we've seen in some of the other cities where these have been in use. And we're interested in hearing this subcommittee's feedback and input on the proposal. And with that, I will turn it over to Keeney Knudsen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I'm going to be really brief and turn it over to Brianna to take you through the presentation. Echoing kind of what Mario had spoken about, we're happy to be here today. I know we talked about this we had an opportunity to present this item to the Aviation and Transportation Subcommittee back in January, where I got some good feedback as well in that presentation. And we do have in the audience with us representatives from Downtown Phoenix Inc., Phoenix Community Alliance, and the scooter vendors as well. So if there are questions that we can't answer, we'll be more than happy to have them come up, and we've talked with them so they can be prepared to answer any of your questions that we are not able to answer. But as Mario pointed out, we're not the first city to do this, but we want to learn from what other cities have learned from this, and it's also a pilot program, so we have the opportunity to be able to do a lot of adjustments to what we see actually happening out there if this pilot program is adopted. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brianna to take you through the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, Madam Chair and members of this subcommittee. So last summer, City Council approved a dockless bike share program, and prior to rolling out the program, the industry really moved away from the dockless bikes into electric scooters because of greater success. And so to date, no vendors have applied for a dockless bike share permit within Phoenix. And so what are electric scooters? Electric scooters, like dockless bikes, is a micromobility service made available in the right-of-way to the public. So users will use their smartphones to locate and rent a scooter, and they will pay per ride on the scooter. So many U.S. cities are recognizing shared electric scooters as a new transportation option and a possible alternative to vehicles. Scooters are being used successfully for short trips as well as last mile connections, particularly with transit. Scooters are made available to all visitors, patrons, and residents, and can help reduce traffic and parking congestion. The city recently received a letter from Phoenix Community Alliance, both encouraging and supporting a downtown pilot program. So staff held a stakeholder meeting in early January to really help develop the proposed elements of the pilot program that you're going to see here today. So 4 vendors participated in that stakeholder meeting. So staff is recommending a pilot program within the downtown Phoenix area, bounded by 7th Avenue to 7th Street, Buckeye Road to McDowell Road. There will be an initial review of the pilot program at 3 months. So the proposed fees are intended to recover the costs of administering the program and will be evaluated during the pilot. So the intent is not to necessarily make money on this program, but really to make sure we're capturing all the costs so there is zero cost for administering the program to Phoenix residents. The fees include a $500 application fee, a $5,000 permit fee for 6 months, a 10-cent surcharge fee per ride, and so every time somebody initiates a ride in Phoenix, there will be a 10-cent surcharge that comes back to Phoenix. In addition, a $80 relocation fee. So the relocation fee is basically if we receive notice that a scooter or we identify that a scooter is properly parked or been abandoned, we will notify them. They have 2 hours to relocate or pick up the scooter. If not, then the city will go and retrieve that scooter and charge the vendor an $80 relocation fee. So in accordance with state law, the proposed fees have been properly posted on the city's website and will remain posted for the minimum of 60 days before any council action. So currently the city has existing ordinances that ban the use of motorized scooters within city limits. And so an ordinance change would be required to allow electric scooters to operate in Phoenix. So as we look at the proposed program overview, we're recommending that riders must be 18 years of age and have a valid driver's license, that riding on sidewalk be prohibited. And so the scooters would be, have to be ridden in the street, preferably in bike lanes. The Street Transportation Department recognizes that as you look in the downtown area, there are limited bike lanes currently, and so we would actively look at opportunities to add additional bike lanes if possible. If not, adding sharrows and signing where appropriate and feasible. We're also recommending a maximum operating speed of 15 miles per hour for the scooters. The scooters would be deployed only in that downtown boundary area, but they would be allowed to be ridden outside of the boundary area. We'd also require vendors to collect the scooters nightly. So this is typical of scooters, which is very different from the dockless bikes. And so because the scooters need to be charged daily, the vendors would collect the scooters nightly. They would charge them and redeploy them in the morning within the downtown boundary area.
Before you go, my understanding on this proposed proposal and everything was that it was going to stay within the downtown boundary. I just heard they will be allowed to ride outside the boundary area. What does that mean?
So that means they'll be deployed in the downtown area. A person can pick up a scooter. We have no way of prohibiting somebody from taking it across McDowell Road or south of Buckeye or east or west of 7th Avenue and 7th Street. And so they will be ridden outside the area. The vendors will then have to collect that scooter and redeploy it in the downtown area once again.
Yeah, go ahead.
Follow up with that. I understand that one of the companies, once you drop off the scooter, you're supposed to take a picture,
Correct.
right? So if you're doing that and you're leaving the scooter in a place where you're not supposed to,
Yeah.
what is that vendor going to do? And all the vendors have that same mechanism of the
Capability.
picture. Yeah.
So, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, so your question is if they're leaving it outside the boundary area or if it's parked improperly? Both. Okay.
Both.
So if it's parked improperly, my understanding, and hopefully the vendors can confirm, that when they take the picture, if they notice that it's parked improperly, they will receive notification of the picture. They will then go and pick up that scooter and park it properly. I'm assuming on the other end, as well as it being ridden outside, they would see that it's ridden outside. They're also GPS. There's GPS on them, so they know where the scooters are. So they should be able to see at any point when the scooters are outside of the boundary area and should be able to go and pick up the scooter and move it back to the downtown area.
I'll go.
Go ahead.
See, this is really where one of my main concerns is because I've already seen them, and we don't even allow them, and they're definitely outside the boundary area, and they're just thrown in the middle of the sidewalk where ADA compliance or anybody walking, they're on the 7s. I see them on the 7s. And in fact, I saw one just kind of thrown in front of the new Sprouts on 7th Avenue in Osborne, and it was hindering getting into Sprouts because the way it was kind of leaned over and driving in. So I guess my question is, there's definitely no way of controlling them going outside of the boundary. However, if they're completely outside the boundary, what is the enforcement? Because to me, it's about enforcement of following our ordinance. And what does that mean? Then I'll be standing on 7th Avenue in Osborne and calling and waiting and see if I'll wait 2 hours to see if it gets picked up, and if it doesn't, then what?
So Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I'll be very honest. At this point, we are going to have staff that's going to have to be monitoring both operator and rider compliance. And so when we talk about that 3-month initial review, that's all of the information that we're going to be bringing back to you in terms of here's what we're seeing out there in terms of compliance, both with riding in the street versus on the sidewalk. Are they properly parked? Are the vendors coming and collecting all the information? And so that's something that the Street Transportation Department will have to monitor very closely so that we can bring you all of that important data to share with you as we look at next steps of the pilot program.
Councilwoman.
Back to what Councilwoman Pastor was saying, so do we know, we only know that one company has that ability about the picture. So do we know how long that company has to ensure that they're gonna go and take this scooter out? I mean, is it an hour, is it 2 hours, what is it?
So typically it would be 2 hours from notification.
Okay, and now you're saying that we have to put staff out there, so how much is that gonna cost?
Exactly.
Us?
And that's all going to have to be part of the evaluation of the pilot program.
Do we even have the staff?
We are evaluating that. We've been communicating with other communities about what staff time they've spent on administering their own programs. And so part of that is what we've used in trying to develop the permit and the fee structure that we have related to this. But as Brianna mentioned, this is a pilot program. We obviously want to spend a lot of time evaluating what works, what doesn't work with this pilot program, so that we can better decide a long-term future for the program, if there is one, and potentially whether it expands outside the downtown area.
But I heard, I'll quote, zero cost. So this is a cost that we're having now.
So the permit fee, the $5,000 per 6 months, is intended, plus the 10-cent surcharge is intended to cover the cost of administering it. And so if during our evaluation period we determine that that needs to be increased, we'll definitely bring those numbers back to you to help justify an increase in that.
Go ahead.
Do we
Oh,
let her
yeah.
finish the presentation?
Okay.
'Cause I have to go.
Okay. So the recommended permit stipulations that we have proposed today are a maximum of 300 scooters per vendor, with the Street Transportation Director having authorization to increase that amount in the best interests of the city. And so because we know that there are priority locations for staging scooters, such as transit stops and event centers, staff is recommending 4 scooters per staging location per vendor to prevent visual blight and better control the right-of-way. The staging locations should be at least 100 feet apart, and parking of the scooters will only be at specified locations and determined by the Street Transportation Department. So we will work with the vendors to identify where they believe the staging location should be in the downtown Phoenix, and we will clearly mark them with some kind of decal or paint identifying this is where the scooters should reside.
Councilwoman Mendoza.
Question back to the 100 feet apart. How many major companies are out there for scooters?
So when we had the stakeholder meeting, we reached out to several vendors. 4 attended the stakeholder meeting. At this point, I know Phoenix Community Alliance had partnered with 3 vendor companies, particularly that had expressed interest in a downtown pilot. So we're anticipating, I would assume, 3 to 4.
Do we know which ones?
Yes.
Okay, so 3 to 4. So that means, or maybe more. So 5 times 4, 20. So every 100 feet, you're going to have 20 scooters, possibly.
So
every 100 feet, 20 scooters.
because we're going to be identifying specified locations, so initially we were looking at this as they were going to be deployed where they felt scooters were being rented based on the data that they were capturing. Here going forward, what we're now recommending is that we're going to identify specific designated locations, and we can work with the council offices on some of those locations and clearly identify here's where we want the scooters parked, here's where we want them deployed every morning, so that when both users and vendors place them out or users are picking them up, they should be in these specified locations.
You just mentioned data. So they can change locations at any time, though, based on their data and the usage, right?
Well, they'd have to come to our department to get approval, and then we would then have to say, we approve this location, and we can work with the council offices on those locations as well. And then we would go out and then we would mark, probably with a decal, because we think the decals are going to be easier because they may have to move.
So in any one of those docking stations, then I could have, you said there are 4 companies, so 4 different scooters in those docking stations. Am I getting that correctly?
Correct. So that would be up to 16 at one location. Now, when we're
Whoa, wait. So we could have 16 scooters. Whoa, I didn't get this visual. I'm visualizing from this picture right here, 16 scooters now all down the sidewalk.
So I think one of the things that we've seen recently with Santa Monica in particular was they actually looked at utilizing off-street parking. And so what they were able to do was they looked for red curbed areas in their downtown where they did not take away parking, and they were able to place them in the street. And they used vertical delineators and identified a boxed area. And so that's something I think we're willing to go out and evaluate and see if that makes sense.
I would just say, Madam Chair, I was just going to mention about the locations as well, is you may not be able to fit 16 in every location because you've got ADA clearance issues and things like that. So that is what we figured from the maximum. If we had 4 vendors, they actually had 4 scooters at each location, 16 would be the maximum. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the case in every location that we're going to be at.
But what if we have 3 more vendors come online? I mean,
well, the 4 scooters per staging location per vendor. I don't know if Brianna mentioned it as well, but that also, the number of those scooters can be changed at our proposed right now is at my direction. So if we say we wanted to lower that or increase that based on what we're seeing out there, that resides within the authority of the director.
So I think, one clarification would be that there may, at certain spots where these are located, there may not be able to be 4 scooters per vendor at those spots. So there's just some sites that just don't have enough space to allow us to do that. And so we would need to make that clear that only, they're at a certain spot, maybe it's only 2 per vendor, or maybe it gets filled up and no other vendors can use that site. So we just want to make that clear that that's the maximum, but there are certain sites where we couldn't do 4 for every single vendor just because there's not enough space.
is that language clear and whatever the ordinance or what do you write? I mean, the language needs to be clear.
Yeah, we will make sure that that's
Because I think it's
clear in the ordinance.
moving fluidly right now. Councilwoman Mendoza.
Thank you. You mentioned that we would use spaces in downtown area to put the scooters in. So we lack already parking in downtown area. So I would hate to take parking to put scooters, and also fire safety, right? If, God forbid, there's a fire in downtown, I mean, we don't want to take any space away from fire lanes and parking or...
And then there's scooters. A fire truck walks up and
Right.
is throwing scooters.
Or we're taking out, the red little lane that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, have you
Madam
thought
Chair,
about
Councilwoman
that?
Mendoza, absolutely. The intent would not be to remove any parking. And so I think that's why as we move forward with this pilot, if it gets approved to move forward, we will work with the vendors to identify the locations. And we'd be more than happy to come back and meet with you guys individually and kind of talk through what we're thinking before we would even implement or roll out any of those designated parking locations.
Councilman Nowakowski.
I think we have 4 more slides.
Can we maybe finish the 4 slides, and then I have many questions also to ask right after the presentation.
Okay. And obviously the vendors must abide by the latest safety and durability standards, including regular maintenance of the scooters. And so all vendors will be required to provide a safety and education program and submit that to the city. And so this program will outline their education process to inform the users of how to safely ride a scooter and how to park a scooter. Some of the components of the safety and education program through the application will include encouraging the use of helmets. And so what we've heard from several of the vendors is that they have a free helmet program. And so if any of the users request a helmet, they will mail them one out for free. A front light and back light will be required on the scooters so that they are visible at night. And the vendors will be responsible to provide specific information related to the city that the ride starts in. So the user will be notified via the app that they are not to be riding on the sidewalks, that they are supposed to be riding in the street, And we can also ask the vendors to encourage the users to look for low volume and low speed streets when selecting if there's no bike lanes available. So information on how to properly park a scooter will also be made available to the user through the app. And so some of the vendors will require the user to take a picture of the parked scooter and submit that through the app to end the ride. The proposed parking requirements are similar to the dockless bike share program and include parking at specified locations, like we've talked about, identifying those designated areas and clearly marking those. A minimum of 4 feet pedestrian travel space, parked upright and on a hard surface, obviously unimpeded access to properties, and that includes ADA ramps and driveways, maintaining vehicular travel area for the vehicle. And so that 2-hour response time. And so we will notify the vendors should it be parked improperly. They have 2 hours to respond. If not, the city will remove the scooter and assess the $80 relocation fee to the vendors. So obviously evaluation during the pilot will be critical to the future steps of the program. So as part of the pilot program, vendors will be required to provide data such as ridership trends, number of incidents, and vendor collected rider surveys. And so staff will monitor operator and rider compliance, will evaluate the fees to ensure that it is cost recovery of administering the program. We will also collect scooter collision data, and we also will be working to collect community feedback on the pilot program. And so the Street Transportation Department, in conjunction with the vendors, will be doing community outreach in February and March with 8 downtown neighborhood groups. And so that will take place in the next couple months, and we'll really be meeting with the neighborhood groups to talk about expectations related to the scooter pilot program and address any concerns that they may have. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Kini to talk about next steps.
So, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I'm talking about next steps, and it's kind of a two-phased approach when we're looking at council approval. Assuming that we get good feedback here today, the next steps would be to do a look at ordinance changes, because as Brianna pointed out earlier, that currently our city code does not permit the use of motorized scooters. So the first thing we would have to do is modify the ordinance to be able to allow those scooters to operate within the downtown area, but also to authorize the pilot program. The next step, as Brianna mentioned, was the 60-day time frame for fees have been posted. The earliest that the council can act on that is in March. So there would be potentially ordinance changes in February that would have a 30-day waiting period before they come into effect. And then the proposed fees would potentially happen in March, which would give us the earliest date we could have an operational pilot program would be about March 22nd, if everything goes smoothly through this. So what are the things that we're doing also behind the scenes, and some things that Brianna mentioned, is formalizing the pilot program requirements. And that is in concert with both the permitting and administrative rules. As we mentioned, that we're gonna have ordinance changes, which are city code, city council authorized changes to our city code. But we also have administrative rules and requirements. And I think we're looking at the combination of those two together will have a complete outline of what our program is. And as Brianna mentioned, as we go out and meet with these community groups in February and March, we expect that there will be some things that they ask for that we're going to incorporate into our permitting requirements and our administrative rules as well, going through here. One thing that's been brought up through the process, and especially here in locally, is about indemnification of liability provisions. All of our requirements within the permitting of having this will require the vendors to have performance bonds, will require them to have insurance, and also to agree to our indemnification provisions. I know that's been some area of discussion, both in the valley but also around the country as well. And we will make sure that they do agree to our indemnification provisions. And we do have a representative of the law department if there's any questions about that. And then finally, the program evaluation. We want to make sure that in this pilot program, we get the data necessary to be able to inform a decision for us to make a recommendation to council going forward about what happens after the pilot program. And we want to be in a position where we have the data from the scooter companies, what the utilization has been. And I think that's one of the concerns that they have as well, is making sure that if we're going to operate a pilot program in downtown, they want to see what happens when ASU is in session, what happens when ASU is not in session, what does that do to demand, and what happens with the scooters when it's in lesser demand. And we want to make sure the issue of blight and how things look aesthetically downtown is addressed as part of this pilot program. that's the conclusion of our presentation. I don't know if you will be more than happy to welcome any questions.
Councilwoman Mendoza?
Thank you. One of my main issues has been blight and safety. And recently, there's been articles detailing safety concerns. Tempe just charged the first electric scooter DUI. My understanding is that the legislature added an exemption to the definition of vehicle under Title 28. This means that as of 2019, people can no longer be charged with reckless driving or DUI if they are impaired on an electric scooter, which tends to happen a lot. I would like to continue having more of a discussion about, what does this mean for us? And what the legislative intent of the bill and what its projected effects will be on DUI statutes. So if someone here from law.
Where's the law and where's law and the legislation?
So, Madam Chair, members, Councilwoman Mendoza, we had reviewed, and law as well had reviewed the initial version of the bill that had been drafted by the legislature dealing with scooters. I wasn't aware of the changes concerning the DUI piece of that, but I don't know if, Mac, if you reviewed that, I don't know. If you have.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, I haven't heard anything about that statute. I know there's a proposed statute on scooters right now, but I'm not familiar with the statute.
So it is House Bill 2652. Right here. It was signed last year, I believe, and it was took effect January 1st of this year.
And then there's another bill going through right now.
Oh, I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, there's another bill coming through. So we don't know anything about it?
Madam Chair,
Okay.
Councilwoman Mendoza, we'll need to make sure that we review that bill and the language or any new language that's being proposed and see how that could impact this program as well. And we can make sure that the council is informed as to our recommendation on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's concerning if someone is drinking and driving and going 50 miles per hour. So what can this person be charged with? What is this going to mean for us? And then now there's another bill.
What would you like?
Madam Chairman, members of the board, we have added language within the G ordinance that allows the Phoenix Police to enforce our own traffic code and civil violations against persons who are on electric scooters. That was a specific thing that we will be including in our G ordinance.
So then, let me see if I can interpret that. The city police will then be able to enforce the ordinance, what the language is in the ordinance. My question is, when it comes to 2652 and the DUI piece, what does that mean?
Madam Chairman, members of the board, without reviewing that statute, I can't give you comment on that, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Councilman Nowakowski.
I think this is a great program, but I'm hearing some concerns here in most of the pilot programs in District 7 and District 8. So some of the concerns I have is talking to some of the individuals at ASU that they're actually banning these scooters off of their campuses. I'm not sure if that's going to be the same for the downtown campus or not. The other concern I have is we've been a big advocate for bike lanes. And one of the things that we're working is in downtown, making sure that there are bike lanes, especially going to the ASU campus from the different apartments and housing units in the downtown area. So if they're not allowed on the sidewalks, then I think we better make sure that we have the bike lanes, and we need to look into what is our master plan and how soon can we have those bike lanes to making sure that people are safe. And saying that, can we talk to our sister cities to find out if there's been any accidents, or how's the sharing of bike lanes with scooters and bikes? If there's any type of conflicts there or problems that they're having, or is there the bike lanes wide enough for both to use? I'm not sure. You're going 15 miles per hour, and I'm not sure how fast a bike can go. But will you be passing one up, or would there be collisions actually within the bike lanes? And then the biggest problem that we have is we have a beautiful light rail down Central Avenue, but there's no bike lanes along Central Avenue. So when we actually had the bike program, that was one of the biggest concerns we heard out there, is that there wasn't enough bike lanes. So I believe that we should really look into this project, but at the same time, we need to be good stewards in making sure that we have the bike lanes so that a project like this is safe and sound for downtown, and basically educate all the businesses of, if there is a scooter parked in front of your businesses, that you could call this number and they would remove it. The whole ADA compliance also, just making sure that if we can have the ambassadors who are downtown can actually be a part of that, making sure that they're placed right, and I'm not sure if that can be, they can be used for that. And the cost for the enforcement part of it, is that enough with the fees that we're charging to cover this pilot program area? So with that, I mean, I'd like you all to come back and maybe show me a master plan of where we're gonna put biking between the Sevens and Buckeye, and bike lanes between Buckeye and McDowell, and making sure that a program like this could be successful. Because I would hate to have those investors come in here, invest so much money, and we don't have the bike lanes to actually make this functionable. And if we can do that, I know that, how soon can we actually put the bike lanes in? Those are just some of the questions I have.
Councilwoman Mendoza.
Thank you. Going back to what Councilman Novakowski said about ASU, and we do have a lot of bike lanes going to different housing developments and in downtown area to and from ASU. So have we talked to ASU, and yeah, do we know if they're going to accept them here? Also, will they work with us to have designated areas for the students? I mean, have we had that conversation with them?
Madam Chair and Councilwoman Mendoza, yes, we've reached out to ASU downtown to kind of talk about this potential pilot. And what they had mentioned to us is that on Taylor Mall, so between Central and First Street, they intend to have them banned in that portion. What's different from downtown Phoenix campus and the Tempe campus is the Tempe campus is a large campus. It's very enclosed. The downtown campus has lots of public streets, public right-of-way around it. So the only area that they were concerned with was Taylor. But we intend to have a stakeholder meeting with both police. We want to meet with parks because this may be a potential issue for the Parks Department. We want to meet with the Phoenix Convention Center because I think they have some concerns about where they will be parked in and around the Phoenix Convention Center. And so we want to meet with police to talk about enforcement. And so we intend to have a meeting this month to kind of bring all of the city internal departments together to talk through the logistics of the program.
Councilwoman Stark?
So let's just go through the next steps again. You still have to modify a current ordinance that does not allow electric scoot. So that would be step one. And then during that time, you'll be working on the formalized pilot program. That would come back to the subcommittee, or would that come back to the council?
Where does that go?
Yeah, where does that go? Because I think it might help us to see some of those requirements so we can better speak to it. And in the meantime, I think it would be helpful if we did talk to Scottsdale. My sister-in-law was in town and she was in Scottsdale, so I was there this weekend. Don't worry, I didn't spend a lot of money in Scottsdale. but having said that, there were a lot of scooters. And the good news is I didn't see a whole lot together, but they were riding on the sidewalk. So I think there is some dialogue we should have with other communities just to make sure we're doing this properly. So we still have some time, right, to come back?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Stark, yes, like I said, the only concern there would be we talk about the ordinance changes, which if we want to have a pilot program potentially operational in March, because of the 30-day implementation period of an ordinance change, we would if we went in February. Our initial intent was to target February 20th to be able to go do that. But like I mentioned before, our intent of this entire pilot program is looking at the ordinance changes and administrative regulations and permitting. But I think the administrative regulations and permitting, we could definitely be able to come back to the subcommittee to provide that information. So in concert, those two work together. But we're at the at the pleasure of whatever the subcommittee recommends as well.
But just as a follow-up, we need to at least modify the existing ordinance to even go down the path of the other rule making. Okay.
That's correct.
So what I'm hearing is, okay, go ahead, and I'm gonna process. Councilwoman Mendoza.
Thank you. So we're talking about enforcement. Are we gonna add police officers to the downtown because of the scooters? And are we gonna have more, I don't know, officers on bike? I don't know. What's the plan?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Mendoza, members of the subcommittee, at this point, no, there are no police officers being added. We are having conversations with the police department about the need to enforce and whether, there may be situations where the police are called to deal with certain situations. And so we want to make sure we work with them and coordinate with them. There's actually a meeting scheduled for later today to speak with the commanders of the Central City Precinct and the Transportation Bureau further to continue this discussion and working with them. But in terms of the enforcement, we have also had a conversation with Downtown Phoenix Inc. about the assistance of ambassadors. And you mentioned this, Councilman Nowakowski, about assistance from them. And so that's something that Downtown Phoenix Inc. has said that they're willing to do to help with educationally, with helping users understand where these can be parked, how these can be ridden, things like they can't be allowed on the sidewalks and that kind of thing, and help promote that education among the users downtown. So that's going to be a big part of this. We will need to rely on the community as well to let us know where they see problems. And so we need to make sure people know where to call and that we're responsive to that right away as soon as we can, and get in touch with the vendors about picking these scooters up if they're left in an inappropriate place, for example. But that piece, we're not, so police officers aren't being added, but that's going to be something that we need to coordinate very closely with them on.
So no cops on scooters, right?
Well,
Not at
that's
this
all
point.
we need is one of them to fall. Question about that enforcement. You talked about the ambassadors. All I heard was the education part. Where's the enforcement part?
So we spoke with with Downtown Phoenix Inc. And in terms of actual enforcement, they don't have the authority to actually detain or cite somebody, and that's something that they wouldn't be able to do. But they can certainly help with letting users know where there's a problem, and they can also be of assistance if there is a need to raise it to the level of getting in touch with the police department. They can be of assistance to do that as well. They've got that ability. But in terms of actually citing or detaining someone, that's not something that the ambassadors would do, but we would certainly welcome the assistance with informing the users on what's appropriate.
Councilwoman Mendoza.
I feel like we still have a lot of questions unanswered, and I mean, I like the program, but obviously there's a lot of still questions and unknowns, and I feel like we're doing this with like unintended consequences, and I just really would like you guys to get back to me or bring it back to the subcommittee.
So this is for action, am I
Is it for
correct?
action?
Madam
No,
Chair,
this is
members of the
for-
subcommittee, this is not
informational?
for action because this item went to Transportation Infrastructure, and they did approve that item on January 22nd.
And see, let me get some clarity here for staff to understand. This came to me. People came and talked to me about this. They said what we would like to do this. This is a downtown subcommittee. But it went to transportation. And when I read my minutes and notes and everything, I was like, oh, hold up. Why is this in transportation? And I can understand that going to transportation, but there's two committees that are affected by this. And the only way I could bring it back and brought it here was only for information only, or discussion, because another committee went and voted on it. So now you have at least 4 people or 3 with some concerns. And we are giving some directives, or we're having a discussion, but in a way we're giving directives. Now, is this same discussion, my question now is, okay, now we're gonna go up to the council, and it's probably gonna be asked to be continued.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we hear you very loud and clear, and it's clear that some more vetting does need to be done with this program. And so, what we're actually going to do is take some time to do some more research for the questions that you've had today that we haven't been able to give you a really strong answer with. And so, and before we actually bring this back to council, we would want to bring this back to subcommittee with those answers to you. So I think that we share a lot of the concerns that you have, and we want to make sure that we're doing this in a right way, and we do this in a careful way that doesn't create bigger problems for the city.
So again, I think we understood it that we would be modifying a current ordinance to allow electric scooters, and then you would start to write the rules and regulations, and that would come back to us. So I think that was our understanding of it. And at that point, we were at 6 months, and you changed it to 3 months because of some of the concerns. So I don't think we thought the process was completed. It was just the next step was we had to modify and start incorporating the fees, but everything would still come back to us. And during that time, if we had any questions, you could meet with us individually. So maybe there was some misunderstanding of how this process was, but my thought was it was just to modify, to start a process.
Okay, so they would start and develop the ordinance or the change, whatever changes are needed. But at what point will the pilot go in? Because I'm hearing, or from what I read, is that things were passed and a pilot was approved.
The recommendation from the Aviation and Transportation Subcommittee was to move forward with the pilot. And so, but it still hasn't gone to the full council, either for the ordinance change or for the ordinance change for the city code, or for the ordinance change for the program and the fees. And so, I believe that it's not at the point where, although we were potentially talking about having a program in place as soon as March 22nd, that would be the absolute soonest if everything were going perfectly smooth, and we got a council action to change an ordinance in February, and then again another one in March to implement the fees and get the program going. But I don't think we're at that point yet, and so I think before this comes to council for another action, we've got some more work to do and some more vetting to take place before that happens.
Councilwoman Mendoza.
Thank you. I was part of the other subcommittee, and again, we understood it was a change, and then develop that policy, what it was going to look like. I also brought it up at that time about the DUI, about the blight, and I just learned about the House bill, and now I just learned today about the new bill that's happening. I don't think we're ready. So I mean, we just need to ensure that we get all these questions answered and do more research and talk to more cities. So that's it.
My understanding is, that this is to move, or the industry is under the impression, because I talked to several of the lobbyists yesterday, that the anticipation is it to move to council. I think we have a formal next week or the 2 weeks, and that to get on the docket for the formal, and then to move and start the pilot. So my question, I'm just going to be real in all of this for the industry to understand what's happening, is that if it goes to council and all these questions that are still up in the air right now aren't answered, more than likely it'll get continued, or it'll die, or it'll pass. Those are the three options. And so I want to understand from staff, what is the process so the industry understands what's happening at this moment, because they're all in here, and understand what what could happen?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I think the way we've been approaching this, we've been trying to be as responsive as we could to a changing market demand out there. We knew that Phoenix Community Alliance had been working with the scooter companies about this, and we didn't get their letter until January 7th when it was finalized. And so we've been trying to work with them to see what we could get as quickly as possible, but understand we have to resolve these issues. We have to resolve the concerns of council in order to get this approved. As we're going through it, we realized there's certain timelines, and if we wanted to have a pilot program implemented as quick as possible, there's some things we'd have to do as a two-step rather than just doing it as a one-step in order to be able to get something in place by March, mid-March. But as Mario noted, I think our best intentions to be able to move this forward. I think we don't want to do that without council's concerns being addressed, and so I think that's what we're going to do is go back and address those before we come back for any full council action.
And our thought would be to come back to the subcommittee to discuss that again before this goes forward to council.
So then you're saying that you'll come back to our subcommittee in March?
I think we would come back to both aviation and transportation and the next, Madam Chair, if it's okay with you to be at the next meeting as well in March for the subcommittee.
And then it'll go to subcommittee, it'll go to council in March, and then the pilot will start in April? That's what I'm
Potentially, this pushes the start date
timeline
further out. Yes. By a month.
Yeah, Madam Chair, member of the subcommittee, the only thing I was going to mention on that, because we've already posted the fees, we don't have a waiting necessary period with that. It's just the ordinance changes themselves to allow electric scooters or motorized scooters to actually operate in the city. They would have a 30-day waiting period before we could actually start a pilot.
Ordinance piece is moving.
I don't think at this point in time we would move that towards council.
Okay.
No. So whenever we would be able to move forward to council, that would necessarily have a 30-day waiting period before we're able to activate a pilot program after council would act.
Okay. Councilman Nowakowski, and then the gentleman over here.
I just want to make sure that we reach out to the community, the residents, to make sure they're informed, and if they have any updates or any concerns, that you address that also, because I think you're hearing a lot of concerns that we're hearing from individuals that are out there. But I want to make sure that the main individuals that are going to be affected by this, between the Sevens and Buckeye and McDowell, are informed also.
Madam Chair, Councilman Nowakowski, that's exactly what we would, even though this timeline may move a little bit, we'll still continue to keep those February and March meetings with the council, with the neighborhood meetings, the neighborhood groups.
Sir.
Madam Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I just want to let you know I quickly looked at the text to House Bill 2652, and that deals with electric bicycles, which are different than electric scooters.
Okay, so that's specifically the bicycles, that's not the scooters?
As I looked at the statute, yes.
Okay. Yesenia, I'm going to switch you out real fast. I'll bring you a chair. I just think because of this dialogue that we're having, Yesenia, could you tell us what's happening with the House bill? There's a House bill moving right now regarding scooters. And I guess I have a law question. Scooters are recognized as what? They're not, are they recognized as a motorized vehicle, or what are they recognized as?
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. So just to clarify, the Senate bill that was introduced yesterday is to provide definitions to what an e-scooter is. And the House bill that was referenced was a bill that passed session last year, and that is House Bill 2652, which has to do with electric bicycles. So as I understand, the Senate bill is adding a definition to what an electric scooter is in a section of statute where currently they have the electric bicycles. And what they're doing is providing definitions that all cities and towns can use to regulate these at the municipal level. They're not providing any regulation or preemption or anything like that in the bill. And we have distributed this to Law and Streets for review as it continues to move, as it was introduced yesterday. We're reviewing it to make sure that that is what's in the bill per our discussions with the proponents.
Okay, so they're basically defining what electric scooters are and how to regulate them. Okay.
Giving the authority to the
Not
city.
regulate, but yes. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions from my council members? I have two people that want to speak.
I have 100 questions.
Okay, well,
Can I just ask one more? Just
sure.
one more.
Go ahead.
What happens if the rest of the companies do not have the photo option where you park the scooter? What are they gonna do? What are they gonna do? Because typically, I'm thinking when you go shopping and you try to leave with the shopping cart, there's a magnetic strip. So, are there options that the other companies are giving you? What are they gonna do?
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, my understanding is that several of the companies have employees deployed that go out and they're monitoring compliance. So if they don't have the option for the picture to end the ride, that they have staff out there who will be monitoring the area to ensure that the scooters are parked properly. In addition to, obviously, we have the ability to go out and monitor and pick up the scooters and collect the $80 fee for that.
My understanding from, and I don't know who I spoke with, is that there's a program where you can apply for, or I don't know, or you become a contractor as to going up and picking up the scooters. I don't know what they're called, but a juicer?
Madam Chair, yes,
Okay.
that is correct. Not all of the vendors use that model, but some of the vendors use that model, what they're calling a gig economy, where they hire individuals who will then pick up the scooters, charge them, and redeploy them on behalf of the company. And so they're not actually specifically company staff.
Okay. I have Joshua Miller. I don't know who.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. My name is Joshua Miller, and I'm the general manager for Lime in Arizona. First, I'd like to express my gratitude to the City Council and staff who's been incredibly supportive during this process. We appreciate that, and we definitely appreciate the transparent and collaborative nature throughout. I'd also like to specifically thank the team of Phoenix Community Alliance, which has been a close partner along the way as well, so thank you for that. We're excited to see the progress of the downtown Phoenix shared electric scooter pilot and look forward to a successful program that brings vibrant micromobility options to Phoenix's revitalization area. Something that I'm specifically proud of is the economic benefits that stem from programs such as this. In Arizona, Lime has more than 50 full-time members of the team that work directly for Lime. In addition, we have more than 1,500 what you call juicers on our team in a community that earns income by collecting and charging scooters on every evening. And we look to expand and invest in communities across the state. So that's one thing we're definitely invested in. A key benefit of the juicer program is that we ensure each scooter is collected overnight to charge. This ensures each device is working safely and is properly staged in an orderly fashion the following morning. I'd like to also stress that we have a robust team, local team in place to ensure operational excellence, and we are committed to making this a safe, orderly, and successful pilot overall. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this morning, and I definitely thank you for your time. So with that, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. David Schwartz. Oh, it says only if necessary.
So my name is David Schwartz with Goodman Schwartz Public Affairs. We're here representing Lime as well, and I want to thank all of you for hearing this item. As Joshua pointed out, one thing Phoenix has always, well, he didn't point this out, but I know from my days years ago when I was sitting there where Tony is, and I will tell you it's much more fun over there than it is here, Tony, just so you know, is one thing the city of Phoenix has always done a really good job when there's something new and you got to kind of tweak it a little bit, is you've always done pilot projects. I remember when I started 20-something years ago at the city of Phoenix, we were piloting the recycling program. And now it's one of your most popular programs. People love to have that. So I think the idea of doing a pilot, trying to make sure we do this right, as Joshua mentioned from Lime's perspective, and I'm sure the others are the same, they will have a real dedicated team on the ground to make sure this works well. And staff want to work with them, work with the PCA. We have a series of meetings coming up with neighborhood community leaders. PCA had actually helped identify that. We start this week and this weekend and going forward. So we want to make sure that they know what's coming up, and we are very excited about this. So with that, I'll leave you alone.
Are there any other questions? David, I would kind of look at it and expand a little bit further out into the historic neighborhoods, because I have a feeling they're going to end up in the historic neighborhoods outside the zone. And so if you can connect with at least Gigi and the Historic Preservation Group, because they meet to discuss the possibilities of it being outside the boundaries, that they're going to more than likely see that.
From Lime's perspective, we're happy to meet with
Okay.
anybody and everybody, because we believe it's a great opportunity to let them know about the devices and how they can get around. So we're all in.
Perfect, thank you. I believe this was for information and discussion. I think you understand where a lot of us have a lot of questions, and anticipating that they'll be answered by the time they reach council. Thank you. Thank you, Yesenia, for coming and clarifying. We are on the redevelopment of Deck Park Vista Apartments. I am going to put Councilwoman Stark in charge. I will be right back.
Thank you, and I believe we have Cindy Stotler here today with Chris Hockey to talk about the redevelopment, and this is for information discussion.
Thank you. Good morning, Councilwoman Stark and members of the subcommittee. Today is a follow-up discussion to last month's presentation by Community and Economic Development Department on multifamily housing in the downtown core. The presentation last month talked about multifamily housing and the types of market, affordable, and workforce housing, and it ended up with some opportunities that housing departments, city-owned properties in the downtown, one of which we want to talk about more in depth today is Deck Park Vista Apartments. As you can see by the map, it's located in the north end of downtown on 3rd Street in Moreland, just south of the I-10, overlooking Hants Park. But before we talk more about that specific property, I'd like to turn it over to Chris Mackey, the Director of Community and Economic Development Department, to give us a little summary of last month's presentation.
Good morning, members of the subcommittee. As you'll recall from our presentation last month, we did a kind of a thorough dive on what our housing opportunities were in a 1, 3, and 5 mile radius of Central and Van Buren. As you'll see, the 3 mile and the 5 mile are in pretty good shape in relation to market and affordable. But when we look at the radius around downtown, it's clear by the 0 on the workforce housing units that we need some additional mixed income projects in downtown. So as Cindy Stotler and I have worked together and looked at this opportunity, one of the things that we saw was the opportunity to leverage some of the city-owned properties that could bring additional workforce housing into the area. As we looked at the workforce that's in the downtown market today, we see really good opportunities on our our market rate side with all the new projects that are under construction, but some need and opportunity in relation to growing both our affordable and our workforce opportunities to match the jobs that are here in the downtown market.
Thank you, Chris. So I want to talk about one of the most exciting opportunities that we have, which is Deck Park Vista Apartments. This is a property that consists of 2.1 acres at 3rd Street in Moreland, as I described. It's north of Roosevelt, south of I-10, overlooking Hants Park. It has 56 units that are designated for seniors age 55 and older. It was built in 1992 with general obligation bonds that are fully paid back, and there are no restrictions on the property currently. And it was designed for senior living. As you can tell, it's a kind of a garden-style block apartment, 2-story, all enclosed for seniors with a key card entry. This designation or this design was something that we built before we had a resurgence in downtown, before light rail, transit-oriented development, and before the downtown code. So there is no consideration in this construction for density, street activation, shade, and walkability. As I said, the conditions are pretty perfect for redevelopment of this property at this time. It's located in highly desirable and nationally recognized Roosevelt Row Arts District. It has downtown code zoning. It has entitlement with that downtown code zoning to up to 250 feet in height and 400 plus units. Again, we have 56 units there, and we have entitlement for 400 units. So we think we have an amazing opportunity here. We do have residents in this 56-unit apartment complex, and we have been speaking with the residents because we have considered redeveloping this for a couple of years now. So we have had various meetings with the residents talking about what redevelopment looks like for them, and what we would do to help them relocate. So we have offered them 13 other senior properties that the City of Phoenix owns, both affordable and public housing for different income mixes. And we have paid for tours of those properties over the last couple of years. We also made them understand that we will pay for moving expenses, so we can relocate them at our expense when redevelopment happens, and that they would have an option to return should they continue to want to live in the downtown when it's redeveloped. It was left off with the residents understanding how redevelopment works, and that we would return at some point when we have more of a schedule. So we have not returned to them for a while, waiting for a direction to go forward and some kind of schedule to give them for timeframes. As discussed before, this neighborhood, the downtown area, has a lot of active community organizations, and understanding that, we have gone to those community organizations to talk to them, including Downtown Voices, Roosevelt Row, Evans Churchill, and the Downtown Partnership, to talk about the possible redevelopment of this property. All of the community organizations and even the nearby residents agree that we need more affordable housing and workforce housing in this neighborhood. They're concerned about longtime residents being pushed out of the neighborhood because they can't afford to live there anymore. They would also have expressed a desire for a more urban development design in this area, and have all expressed that there is an opportunity for an iconic artistic design because this is the Roosevelt Row nationally recognized arts district. So again, we believe we have a unique opportunity to take advantage of a city-owned property in a very highly desired downtown neighborhood. It's extremely underutilized at this point with 56 units when we could have 400 units. It solves a housing problem that Chris Mackey and her staff, with your incredible comprehensive study of the market, showed that we have zero workforce housing in the downtown core and very few affordable units. So we definitely have a need, and we can definitely solve that problem or help to solve that problem. And we also have community support from the community groups and the surrounding residents. So with that, I would like to ask for discussion and some information from the council if you are willing to give us feedback on should we pursue in our request for proposals for redevelopment, and if so, what should we concentrate on should we do that?
Councilwoman Mendoza.
Thank you. This property is in my district, and there aren't many city-owned lots in downtown Phoenix that we can develop, and I believe that this is a perfect opportunity for us to do that. Again, we don't have workforce housing, and we have little affordable, and I believe I would like to move forward with an RFP and ensure that we have that mixed income housing and with senior workforce market rate, and also include some of the programs that that we have, right, for our seniors or for our constituents in general. So I mean, that's some of my feedback.
So I have some questions. I believe, I don't know which slide it is, but it said something about 200 units are underutilized. So you are anticipating go up to 250 in height?
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, we have entitlement through the downtown code for up to 250 feet in height. That doesn't mean we can go up that high. We'll have to see what pans out financially, but we have the entitlement to do that, and up to 400 units of density.
Okay, so we could possibly have 400 units of workforce and affordability, because I heard market. So when I hear market, I hear mixed use, I hear different, I don't know what I hear. I hear market where we're going to be, there's some homes in there at market rate. So is this going to be a mixed use, or is this going to be 400 affordability and workforce?
And Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, that is exactly the feedback we're seeking today, is what exactly type of housing would you like us to seek in an RFP? Are you interested in a true mixed-in community that has affordable workforce and market rate? Are you looking for primarily affordable? Are you looking for primarily workforce? Those are the questions that we have when we have to construct a request for proposals. We would put that out to the development community of what exactly we're looking for there.
So when you put an RFP out to the development community, they invest this money. So is this a private-public partnership where they invest the money and there's a certain amount of income we receive, or a certain amount of revenue we receive, and then the rest goes to the developer? I'm trying to understand I'm trying to understand what you would like to do.
So, Madam
versus
Chair,
me telling you what to do. I already know there are plans, so I rather know what would you like to see?
Sure, Madam Chair. So what makes the most sense to us in the Housing Department is to issue a request for proposals for a co-developer. Both we can issue it to for-profit or nonprofit, or whichever we're directed to do. A co-developer to work with us to develop and find financing for the types of housing that you're looking for. And if it's mixed income, we could look for financing for affordable and workforce housing. And we would throw that RFP out. But we would be a co-developer, so City of Phoenix Housing Department would still be an ownership entity in this co-development, so that we would maintain ownership of the property over the long term. And any co-development agreement usually involves the splitting of any development fee at the end of the development, and that would be a subject of negotiation in the RFP and contract process with the co-developer.
But at the end of the day, we own the apartments and the land, and we will then continue providing affordability and workforce.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, my outcome, or for residents of the city, is to have senior affordability and workforce in downtown, since they were there from the very beginning and were there at the time where nobody would want to live in that area. And so now I really want to maintain the integrity of what the purpose of Deck Park was meant to be used, and it still be maintained for the future. And so for me, and I believe all council probably, it's not about, as long as that is the standard and to maintain, how you get there is up to give us some advice or suggestions, so then we can decide, okay, this is the best way to go. That's the way I'm looking at it, but it's Councilwoman Mendoza's area, and so I defer to her.
In the Garfield neighborhood, we recently approved a project that had market rate and affordability. So maybe, is there any way that you can do an analysis of just affordability, workforce, and another analysis of market, affordability, senior? Is there any way you can do that, or?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Mendoza, absolutely. Cindy Stotler's team and my team can work together to take the data that we have on the entire market, drill it down to exactly what you're looking for, and bring that back to you with the analysis on what that recommendation from the data would be.
Thank you. Because yes, my priority is the workforce, the senior, the affordability, and if the market rate can fit there, then I want to see that. So,
I mean,
So,
there's a
Madam
lot of possibilities of mixed use.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we do have a recent market study that was done for this area that does indicate the need for workforce housing, not necessarily market rate. There has been thousands of units built in the downtown, thanks to our hardworking Community Economic Development Director, built recently in the downtown. So market rate is Possibly at capacity, we'd have to do a market study for that. I was looking at specifically the need for affordable and workforce to see if there could be financing for that. You have to have a market study that justifies that. And it did come back and say at least 200 units of workforce housing was needed in this area. So we have a market study that supports that. So we could go back and look at that with community economic development and devise a breakdown of affordable and workforce housing.
Would this be senior or be mixed use?
So Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, would be open housing to any occupants that want to, whatever their age. When we designate a property for senior and we build specifically for seniors, we tend to build those as all enclosed and key card entry. They're very secure, and they have a lot of amenities that are built specifically for seniors. You know, things like handholds in the hallways and those kinds of things. So, so if we built back for seniors, that would may not attract other workforce and other individuals looking for affordable. So, but we have a lot of seniors in our regular affordable housing as well. So, if you're looking for us to build back, I would need that direction. If you're looking for us to build back specific senior housing, that would be a different design and maybe a different phase or something like that over this large property.
I'm looking at, because this has been designated for seniors. I think it's unfair that we don't build some of these apartments for seniors. There's 56 units dedicated to them, and somewhere in this mix, 56 units needs to be part, if not more, of this piece. And how that works, I don't know. Or there's 56 units throughout, I'm thinking of big high-rise, throughout the floors of seniors. I mean, because we're moving them out, and really in the downtown area, how I look, the richness of it is the diversity in age, and they also have some disposable money where we want them out in the restaurants and enjoying the entertainment. So I think that's kind of the mindset we have to look at. So yeah.
I agree with Councilwoman Pastor. I mean, it's all about the design, right? How you build this development and ensuring that we add the units for seniors. So, I mean, it's all a possibility, right? I mean,
absolutely, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, whatever we want to see, we can put into the request for proposals and ask developers to come up with a design that suits both the seniors coming back and at least 56 or more units of senior housing, as well as mixed income, affordable, and workforce.
I just, in the mind as we build for the future, because we build now and then it's for the future, really what is the best model for sustainability? And what does that look like? And Chris, you would know.
Chairwoman and members of the subcommittee, and that's, as Cindy and I have talked about it, is that leveraging that city-owned property to maintain workforce and affordability in the downtown market so that we ensure that diversity, that we ensure that the market's attainable, that we ensure that we don't lose that connectivity to all ages and all areas of our workforce, and providing that opportunity to leverage a built environment, the infrastructure that's already here, the transit that's already here. So being able to utilize that city-owned property to encourage and drive that affordability and workforce is, I think, what we're really interested in leveraging that sustainability to keep downtown and its sustainability moving forward in the right direction.
And I would add that mixing the income certainly makes a more sustainable property for the future as well. When we limit it to one single type of housing or income, it really it restricts us for sustainability in the long term. So if we look for this mixed income that you're talking about, where they include senior, affordable, and workforce, I believe we have a better opportunity for sustainable housing in the future.
Councilwoman Mendoza?
Thank you. Can we also see in the analysis for retail as well in that development? And I would really also love to see a partnership with nonprofits that have extensive experience in mixed income support services. Yeah, thank you.
You just needed a discussion and then you'll come back.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we will take your feedback and work together on an RFP proposal and then come back to the subcommittee with that proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're on item 13. We're almost there. I'm going to try to get out right on time.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. The last iteration of our convention center was built. There were 3 permanent walls built underground and 1 temporary wall. Subsequent to that, in recent times, we've had some structural integrity issues raised about the temporary wall. And so we're here to talk to you about the wall, what we're doing about it, and what next steps would look like.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, John Chan, Phoenix Convention Center Director, along with Keeney Knutson with the Street Transportation Department and City Engineer Eric Froberg. I want to start by giving you a little bit of background. As Mr. Dehoney had mentioned, this is an aerial photograph of the Convention Center campus. As you can see on this photo, the expansion project was built in multiple phases. So phase 1 was completed in 2006, and phase 2 was completed in 2008. There is a third building to the south of Washington Street, which was planned as a future expansion. And what's important to today's discussion is that future phase 3 expansion was envisioned as a contiguous underground expansion under Washington Street. So this large photo that you're looking at is a photo of the wall during construction. As you can see, it runs parallel to Washington Street and the light rail line. This wall is pretty substantial. It's more than 2 city blocks long by 45 feet deep. And it was designed as a temporary structure left in place as a way to facilitate future expansion. So again, another image of the wall during construction. As you can see, it's built with steel beams and wood planks. And because the wall was built as a temporary structure, it requires annual engineering inspections and certification by a structural engineer. We also provide ongoing maintenance over the years to extend the life of the wall. And in the most recent engineering report, the structural engineer has determined that the wall is approaching the end of its useful life. And at this point in time, I'll turn it over to Keeney and Eric and talk about exactly what that means and what we need to do moving forward.
So, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, thanks, John. As John mentioned, that there's been an annual inspection done of this, and one thing that's been noted in the most recent inspection is some deterioration, and it's probably in contribution to some maybe water intrusion that's happened over the years, vibration, but it's just the fact that this temporary wall definitely has an end of service life time frame, and I think we're right there. We've done, Convention Center has done a great job of trying to extend the service life of this wall up to this point. But I think at this point in time, we all have seen that we need to address this and get a permanent solution so that there is not a failure of the wall or of any kind that causes issues for public safety or for the business of the convention center as well. So we have gone and worked and got a construction firm and a consulting firm on board to do analysis, to do looking at the design and to replace that temporary wall with a permanent structure. Obviously, first and foremost, we want to do it right and do it the correct way. But at the same time, we want to look at ways to be able to minimize impacts to the public as well as the convention center business. We do have a couple of major events that are coming on in a number of years, and we want to make sure that this is something that is addressed before we have those events coming forward.
So where we're at currently is, as Kenny had discussed, the design team is quickly approaching the 60% design. We expect that to be done in the next couple of weeks. And then this ongoing schedule is that by the end of April, we will have 90% design along with construction timeline and cost estimates. So what we would like to do is come back to the subcommittee after we have the 90% design and kind of present options moving forward, detailed information on timeline, cost, and financing. And just to point out on this image that you're looking at, this is the area that we're talking about that will be affected during construction. So this is the sidewalk adjacent to Washington Street. The solid yellow line is approximately where the wall, the current temporary wall is below grade. And then the dashed green line is the approximate location of where the new permanent wall would have to be constructed. So there's going to be some disruption to the sidewalk and pedestrian traffic, but we will be working closely with light rail to coordinate, and with streets to coordinate the construction.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, obviously with the way you work on this, the idea would be to not impact light rail operations.
Okay.
But when we're working with that close to the main line of the light rail tracks, we need to make sure we're coordinating with Valley Metro, obviously, to make sure that there is no impact to their service.
Okay. So, is there an action? Is there? We're just keeping it going, right? Okay. I just don't know. I don't have my agenda in front of me, and just tell me which ones are actions. So, okay, so that's for information only. As you know, a wall is deteriorating. We do not want another library, and so I thought I be able to bring it to you so that you know that we are now putting a permanent wall. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The next item as they come up is equity best practices. This dialogue has been going on, I would say, for the last 4 years. And people have been trained in this area, have gone to training in order to try to start implementing this conversation. We attempted it on the South Central Light Rail. It started there, and as we saw, we've learned a lot of lessons with that dialogue and how we really need to look in a bigger holistic fashion on the conversation of equity instead of siloing certain areas or certain projects. So they're going to do an overview on this, and this has also been brought for, I would say, 3 years by the community to have this dialogue. So here we go.
Thank you, Chairwoman. So good morning, Chairwoman Pastor and subcommittee members. With me today, I'm Tony Macaron with the City Manager's Office, and with me today are Don Logan, the Director of the Equal Opportunity Department, and Quaylen Waller, who is in the Human Services Department Workforce Connection area. As you said, Madam Chair, we are here today to talk about equity practices, and at this point, I'll turn it over to Don Logan for the presentation.
Tony, thank you. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, good morning. During the summer of 2017, members of the community expressed an interest in the city's equity efforts. In June 2018, Equal Opportunity Department staff attended a national equity conference. Lessons from the conference included, in order to have a successful equity program, you need to have a commitment from the top down. Second, you need to have a flexible approach, one that's inclusive of each and every entity. And third, you need to be resilient. Clearly, you need to be resilient in order to be successful. As a result of the equity community relations, the division was amended to add equity as part of the Equal Opportunity Department function. The Community Relations and Equity Division conducted research to explore equity programs nationwide and identifying some equity best practices from a number of government entities. These agencies included Seattle, Washington, Portland, Oregon, Madison, Wisconsin, Fairfax County, Virginia, Austin, Texas, Oakland, Los Angeles, Long Beach, California, and the state of Michigan. Characteristics of equity best practices include a governing body and a government organization commitment. There needs to be a connection between the governing body as well as the organization. Identify the power and influence of the institution or organization. There needs to be collaboration that's invested through partnerships. Use of a protected characteristic framework as a lens to measuring equity, such as religion, race, sex, etc. A program needs to be sustainable. You need to do whatever assurances you have to ensure that a program is sustainable. There needs to be equity tools that have been utilized, and any equity program needs to be data-driven, use of facts and stats to support equity decisions. Additional equity practices include, there needs to be a sense of urgency in terms of how we communicate and how we act on equity initiatives. Continue to evaluate program effectiveness and be adaptable. Develop tangible equity goals, track progress, and develop accountability measures for any equity initiatives. Be open and transparent in how we communicate equity. Engage in a broad audience to ensure that there is inclusiveness. Be proactive and get ahead of community issues. At this time, I turn the presentation over to Quaylen, who will present on the equity opportunity that the city recently participated in.
Thank you, Don. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. In April of 2017, Phoenix, along with Austin, Texas, Baltimore, Maryland, Louisville, Kentucky, Nashville, Tennessee, and Sacramento, California, were selected to participate in the National League of Cities Equitable Economic Development Fellowship. The fellowship provided 18 months of technical assistance for each of the cities I just mentioned to help ensure more equitable and inclusive economic development outcomes. Cities were required to select a specific challenge around equity and economic development, and Phoenix selected the South Central Light Rail project. The team made up of staff from the mayor's office, city manager's office, planning and development, neighborhood services, and community and economic development looked at how Phoenix should consider introducing a major transportation project such as South Central Light Rail into a community in its most equitable way. And how do we, together, the city and the community, preserve legacy of a corridor while building towards a healthy future? So some of the lessons we learned, the fellowship was a great opportunity for staff to learn more about pursuing equitable and inclusive economic outcomes and what other cities are doing. When it comes to the project we selected, we've learned a lot. One of the things was that it's just not a light rail project, and that it's a neighborhood improvement project. And so just by listening to our stakeholders before you go in, how you talk about the project is very different. Secondly, equitable community engagement and training. We also heard from the community that they need to be a part of that discussion, and it's a continually learning and changing. And that there's not a one-size-fits-all community engagement strategy. So by working together, the city and stakeholders, being able to come up with what equitable community engagement looks like. We also heard that community engagement needs to be intentional and inclusive. Each community is different, and there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to equitable community engagement. It's also important that the city work closely with the community to understand its workforce needs. In this process, one of the things that the team heard by talking to stakeholders and then other cities and even National League of Cities, that you really should be talking to your community what their workforce needs are and then developing a plan from there. And then secondly, starting early to help businesses prepare for what's to come, trying to see what their needs are and how we can help them survive their construction and also thrive after the project is complete. Now I'd like to turn the presentation back over to Don Logan.
Quaylen, thank you. The foundation for an effective equity program is empathy and respect. The Phoenix Respect campaign was initiated last year for the purpose of ensuring that all of our employees were to conduct themselves in a manner that is civil, inclusive, kind, and respectful. We were prepared to share a short video that was used to introduce the Phoenix Respect campaign, but in the interest of time, we'll delay that and share that with the committee at a different time, later date. New training workshops were designed to replace the civil treatment for employees class previously facilitated by Human Resources. The new workshops will cover topics that include unconscious bias, diversity inclusion, workplace harassment, bullying, and more. Advancing a culture of equity. During our research, we learned that there were several organizations that provide support, training, and development of equity programs for government agencies. At the suggestion of Councilwoman Pastor, we researched the GARE organization, Government Alliance on Race and Equity. GARE's strategies include organizing membership network of jurisdictions that work to advance equity, expanding pathways for new jurisdictions to begin doing equity work via work with individual jurisdictions, and supporting and building local and regional collaborations that are broadly inclusive and focused on achieving equity. Now, Madam Chair, I turn the presentation back over to Tony Macaroni with closing comments.
Thank you, Don. So this concludes our presentation today. This was for information only to let you know what external and internal programs we were working on. And we are seeking some subcommittee direction, and we're happy to return in March with further detail.
Councilwoman Mendoza.
Thank you. I'm really excited to see this, and I want to thank Councilwoman Pastor for bringing this to the table and leading this. You talked about best practices by other cities, fellowship, and GARE. So are you developing, or do you already have a program developed for this for the city? How can you just, I'm a little confused.
Chairwoman and Councilwoman, we've done the research on the best practices.
Okay.
Staff went to conferences,
Mhm.
and we are currently formulating a program.
Okay.
Councilwoman Pastor is wanting us to take it to the next level, which we absolutely are ready to do. And one of those things involves training, some more training of our executive leadership. And that's where the GARE organization comes in. They offer that kind of leadership training to our employees.
So it's training, and so the reason why I'm bringing it to the committee, since equity is part of the committee, and it has been moving through our systems in a very silo fashion. I would like to now bring it to the forefront of working with GARE in training over 200 of our employees, top-level employees, to understand the conversation of equity. And what does that look like, and how does that look like? My intent is really, if you could say it's selfish, I don't know. My intent is that I've been working on equity within the school systems for the last 8 years. And what equity looks like is really about looking at budgets and about looking at systems within the government and school system as to really where is the need in order to help support, say, more children to rise to the occasion of their reading. Where's the dollars going to? And that's kind of where future conversation, but I think we need to get it started. And so that's why I brought it to the committee. GARE, I have made a commitment, if this goes forward and moves forward, I've made the commitment that I will raise the money needed in order to get those trained for the 200 employees, that it would not be coming out of general fund or anywhere else, but the training, I will raise the money to get the training up and off the ground. There are nonprofits that are wanting to see this work happen, And so I have been speaking with them on working with them and then, and getting the dollars. So money would not be tied to the general fund. So that's, I really want to get it up and off the ground. If I could have gotten it up off the ground on January, I would have, but I wasn't ready. And so here we are, and I just want to start moving it so it happens.
And then you come back in March.
We will come back in March with everything, with the nonprofits that are willing to work with us to secure the money and then have the details. Okay?
Very much needed.
All right, thank you,
Thank you.
appreciate it. I believe there are items, if you have any items, please give them to me. There are no call to the public, meeting adjourned. Okay, 6 minutes.